Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, giving you the betting edge on the three biggest games of the week, courtesy Steve Merrill, of course, from Pro Sports Info and also Wager Talk TV right here on YouTube. Steve, how are we doing today?
Hey, Mark, doing well.
All right, let's get right to it. Texas, Oklahoma State. Of course, the Longhorns blew a huge, enormous lead, 21 points in the first half against Oklahoma. Come home to take on Oklahoma State as a 5-point favorite against an undefeated Cowboys team.
Yeah, and last week I thought the line was about a point or two too high. I thought the value rather was with Texas. I made the line 2. The line came about 3.5, and obviously it was a back and forth game. Could have gone either way. Once again, my power rating shows some value with Texas this week. It actually makes them a 10-point favorite. The line is only 5, but we have to be very cautious with this game because, as you mentioned, it was a high-scoring back and forth loss against Oklahoma. And teams often let down after tough losses, especially high-scoring losses, and even more so when their national title hopes are shot. And Texas, that loss at Arkansas obviously hurt their chances early in the season, but they came back and went 3-0 straight up in ATS after that. This loss last week against Oklahoma really hurts their chances and basically eliminates them. If they won that game, they were in the running. Almost could say they somewhat controlled their own destiny, especially with Alabama losing, obviously. So you got to be very cautious with how Texas bounces back here. And although there's line value, the situational spot does not look good, especially against an Oklahoma State team that theoretically, Mark, controls their own destiny at 5-0 straight up in that national title picture. I think Texas is the better team here, but it's not a great scheduling spot. It's a dangerous letdown situation.
We enjoy the conversation each and every week. One of my favorite segments. Learn so much from this guy, Steve Merrill, Pro Sports Info, and also Wager Talk. But you just get a slice right here. Join them at those two destinations. And then, of course, you get our under-the-radar pick of the week from Steve on Patreon. All right, Kentucky, Georgia, great story surrounding the Cats. They have upset Florida and then defeated LSU last week. Going to Georgia, though, and Vegas pretty much can't find a number that's going to be high enough to chase down the Georgia Bulldogs. It's 22.5 at home against Kentucky this week.
Yeah, and they really aren't setting the numbers right, to be honest. If you recall a couple weeks ago, I actually said here on this show that there was value with both Alabama and Georgia in their big games, against Ole Miss and also against Arkansas, and both Bama and Georgia covered those games. And Georgia went off. They're about an 18-point favorite when we were doing the show. They closed as low as 16. My power ratings favor them by 25 over Arkansas, and they won 37-0. Last week, a lot of people thought that might be a potential flat spot. I thought the number was pretty much spot on. I made it 15. It closed right around 15. And I said I did not want to get in front of that Georgia train. They beat Auburn 34-10. Now it's a high-profile game against 11th-ranked Kentucky. Georgia's not going to overlook this game. They have a bye week after this before the big cocktail party against Florida. That is a huge look ahead, but they have a bye week, so I don't think they get caught looking too far ahead of the Gators. And my power ratings actually favor Georgia by 30 in this game. It's very rare, Mark, that we say the best team in college football is getting a touchdown of line value, but that's the case here. Georgia's a team I'm not going to play against, the best team in college football. And then on top of that, this line is surprisingly still too short. I know Kentucky's had a good season so far at 6-0 straight up. They've been solid on both sides of the ball. A good defensive line, just 18 points a game. Now they're getting 22.5. But it's not enough. Georgia puts up 40 a game, but more importantly, Georgia stops everybody. 5.5 points per game, 3.5 yards per play allowed. Kentucky's going to have trouble getting that backdoor cover against this Georgia defense. And surprisingly, the line is still too short. The odds makers have not caught up to how good this Georgia team is.
The Georgia domination is astounding because Kentucky is a top 10 team in the nation, and they are legitimately a top 15 team in the nation. On the field, play, talent, performance, it's astounding how good Georgia is at this point. All right. Again, catch us, Steve, at Pro Sports Info, also at Wager Talk TV right here on YouTube. You get so much more NFL, Major League Baseball playoffs, the NBA's coming up soon. And, of course, join us on Patreon for Steve's under-the-radar selection of the week and also my picks against the top 25, 10-6 against the spread last week, over 58% against the spread this season. Alabama, Mississippi State. Of course, Texas A&M, Alabama was a game that people talked about the entire offseason, but when it got to the game, considering the Texas A&M performance in 2021, it was discarded. And then Alabama comes in as an 18-point favorite. A&M covers, wins the game outright 41-38. Mississippi State, a team that actually did what Alabama could not do, went to Kyle Field, beat Texas A&M on the road a couple weeks ago, host Alabama as a 17-point underdog.
Yeah, first of all, let's look at the power ratings. Alabama 16 in this game. So the line's a little bit high. It's about a point too high based on my ratings. 17 is a key number. So you can make a little bit of an argument that there's some value maybe with Mississippi State at 17 or more. But the key handicap to this game, just like we talked about with that Texas game, Mark, is, how does Alabama respond to the loss? Historically speaking, over the last 2-3 decades since I've been doing this, if you blindly play against teams that lose their first game in October or later, that's about a 60% play. They only cover about 40% of the time. The main reason is because, as I said earlier, teams often let down when they have that national title defeat, in the regular season. That's not the case with Alabama here, because if they run the table, beat Georgia in the title game for the SEC, they're going to make the playoffs. The problem is they're going to be, right now we're seeing a look at a line about Georgia about 4. So the odds makers are saying there's only about a 35-40% chance that Alabama would beat Georgia right now. So even if Bama runs the table regular season here, which they probably should, they're going to be a double-digit favorite, I would think, in all these games. They likely will finish with 2 losses, and that's going to be dicey. They probably are going to be on the outside looking in with 2 losses. They could maybe still get in. They run the table, though, they get in. They control their own destiny. So do they let down this week after a rare loss? I actually did an Alabama-Tennessee Valley show here a little bit earlier this afternoon, and we talked about this game, of course, and the host, Tom Abraham, had a great stat. The last 4 times that Alabama has turned the ball over twice, they've lost. Not a net -2 turnover margin. If they've had 2 turnovers or more, they've lost. That's how rarely they do that. In fact, over the first 5 games of the season, they'd only had 3 total turnovers. And they had 2 last week, only a -1 margin. But it made the difference. They lost 41-38. Let's keep in mind, Texas A&M was probably the 5th best team in the country last year. They were the one team on the outside looking into the playoffs. Maybe were one of the top 4. Based on my power ratings, they probably were. They just had underachieved this season. So that's why the loss looks bad, as you said, as a 2-touchdown favorite. But that's still a really good A&M team, and we'll see what they do this week against Missouri. I think they're going to beat up on that bad defense. So Alabama still controls their own destiny technically. The line's pretty much spot on. Handicapping this game really comes down to what Bama can do defensively. Do they come in flat, or do they shut down a very average Mississippi State defense? In general, you probably don't want to fade Saban in a good spot like this. And we'll see if Alabama brings their A game. This will be a very interesting game to watch, even if you're not involved as a handicapper, a kind of a wait-and-see take approach to how we handicap them going forward the rest of the season.
Again, it's Steve Merrill joins us each and every week to highlight the 3 top college football games of the weekend. Join him on Wager Talk, Pro Sports Info as well. He's got you covered top to bottom. College basketball, the NBA coming up, Major League Baseball playoffs in effect right now, as well as the NFL, college football as well. Join us on Patreon. I've got you covered 10-6 against the spread last week. And, of course, Steve's under the radar selection of the week. So join us on Patreon. Just search Mark Rogers TV or grab the link down in the description section below.